You're enjoying Racing World. It's brought to you by Perspective Group. It's your global motorsport podcast show brought to you in conjunction with Race Control Magazine.
Well, it's almost the end of March, but it's another edition of Racing World. On this week's edition of Racing World, I'm going to touch on three topics because there are three that are probably quite dear to my heart. Number one, the final race meeting ever at Pukekohe Park Raceway was held last weekend in New Zealand. What a phenomenal weekend. I was there for both days. There was everything from trucks to cars to aeroplanes flying in the air, full car park, great atmosphere, lots of emotion. It was a very fitting farewell to what's been a great circuit for New Zealand motorsport since the 60s, and it's hosted the New Zealand Grand Prix, a world named Grand Prix outside of Macau. That is the only Grand Prix in the world to be officially called a Grand Prix. The era of the Tasman series and early on with the likes of Holm, Amon, McLaren, Stewart, Rindt, the list just goes on, and then it moved to the Atlantic series and then onwards and onwards and onwards. There is just so much history in Pukekohe. For me personally, a big period of my life was spent there during 2001 through to about the mid-2000s, producing the V8 supercars for TVNZ, and it was an enormous task at the time, and looking back on it now, I don't regret any moment of it. It was a fantastic transformation of the circuit. It was the return of touring car racing to New Zealand at that level, and we did some amazing things over the years, and very proud of everyone that worked on that, and the number of film and TV awards that we were able to take away as well, and the Merit Award from Supercars Australia. So yep, I've got my own memories of Pukekohe just as everyone else does, but it was a great weekend, really enjoyable, and just a fantastic all-round weekend. Number two, Australian Formula 1 Grand Prix this weekend. What will happen with Red Bull? Starting to sense that maybe Sergio and Max aren't clicking together. Christian's going to have to sort that one out, that's for sure. But that happens when teams are on top, so we'll have to wait and see. Aston Martin, dark horse in the pack, and already people are saying, could Alonso challenge for a world championship title this year? I actually think he probably could, because a confident Fernando is probably someone that the rest of the field don't want to see, because he will be very, very competitive, and clearly the new Aston Martin is a competitive car, and there's some changes coming as well in terms of the rear wing configuration for it, and I know Mercedes are revising some of their car as well, and maybe conforming more to the standard look that people have got and getting away from their concept look. But all that takes time and it takes expense, and of course they can't clip the cost cap as Red Bull did last year because you don't want to go anywhere near that. So Australian Grand Prix this weekend, good support field over there, Supercars, Porsche Carrera Cup Australia, number of things. Great venue, spent many years there, again covering it for TVNZ, and it's a fantastic venue. Sitting on the grass mounds there is one of the best viewing areas I think that there is around, and you see the cars at speed as well. So it's going to be good. I think the takeout factors this week will be, can the Red Bull dominance continue? Can Aston Martin break that dominance? What will Ferrari do? Is there anything left in the tank from Mercedes? And then it's really the battle of the midfield, Haas challenging maybe Alpine, and even Williams is in amongst the mix, and then McLaren have really got to turn their game around, and of course for Oscar Piastri, it's his home Grand Prix, first time he's ever tasted that, so there's a bit of added pressure. Number three, in this preview as we get to it, Texas. Yes, the High Bank Oval at Texas Motor Speedway is the second round of the NTT INDYCAR series for the season, and boy oh boy is it going to be a fantastic one. 28 cars lining up for the start of this. Very limited practice on this track, so it's almost going to be bring your car as you intend to race it, because there's not a lot of time to muck around with setup changes, but there are quite a few number of aerodynamic modifications allowed for the teams on this particular oval spec setup for this weekend, and there's some little winglets, some little tiny barge boards, and some diffuser area applications that people can apply. But you're going to have to be confident about doing those, because yeah, there's not that much practice time, so it will be very interesting. And of course last year was a little bit controversial with the PJ1 sealant that NASCAR had put on there to help with the grip levels of the NASCAR racing on the type of tyre that they run on, which unfortunately didn't help IndyCar. And I spoke to Scott Dixon just a couple of days ago to get his thoughts on that.
Let's begin. Way down under, David Turner patiently waiting, already has his hand up, and I'm going to ask has a familiar accent for us here today.
Well, I'll try and keep the accent to a minimum and I'll let Scott do the talking. Scott, just looking at last year and the issues that with the NASCAR type surface that created almost the one lane racing and then got extended out a little bit. Do you see that being sort of better this year than what we've seen recently?
That's actually a good question, and yeah, I have no idea. Half the time we don't realize some of the stuff until we actually turn up. So I'm not actually sure if they have applied some of that, that texture to the high lane. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I actually haven't heard if they've been trying to, because typically at this point they will actually be trying to scrub it off or remove it. But I think last year it was maybe closer timing, or maybe they ran just before us, so there was a different shift, I think, in how that applied. So maybe this year I don't think they would have had anything until their fall race. So there was nothing earlier in the season. So we'll see how that definitely applies. I think with the addition of that highline practice, that will give everybody at least some idea of what that grip level's like. But yeah, it's a good question. I'll be asking probably the team after this call to see what state that high lane is in.
Well, I'm glad I contributed to something for a change. Just be pleased to know too, it was the final farewell to Pukekohe Park Raceway on the weekend here in New Zealand, and it was a pretty moving experience. Actually, your name came up in quite a lot of conversations, as it normally does. But it was a great send off, and Kenny got to drive a McLaren around the track, so it was a very fun way to close the park.
What McLaren was it?
Oh, just a normal road car, but in his eyes it was still a McLaren, okay. And then in Kenny's eyes, he's now a McLaren driver.
Yeah, he'll be charging Zach for that, I'm sure. But yeah, it was bummed the timing, I think, of the closing of what was such a prolific circuit, I think, for New Zealand motor racing across the board, and all of us that done many laps around that place. So yeah, sad that I wasn't there for that weekend, but yeah. Onwards and upwards, I guess, as far as other race circuits go around. But yeah, definitely all of us will miss Pukekohe Raceway.
That's right. Well, all the best to all of you at the Ganassi squad. And I know a lot of you personally. So go well this weekend and enjoy Texas, and get ready to shoot those pistols.
That's right, man. Looking forward to it, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dave.
Okay, David. Thank you, sir.
Well, clearly the man that's won at Texas a heck of a lot had forgotten about the PJ one, but it's certainly on his attention now. So maybe I've opened up a can of worms there for Dixie. And great to hear his comments on Pukekohe as well. I think Scott's won round there so many times before, but don't forget last year it was nearly the other Scott, McLaughlin, that took out the race win, only to be pipped on the line by his teammate Joseph Newgarden. So you would expect the Penske cars to be strong again. Andretti will be hoping to continue what's looking like a return to fortune for them. And I really think, McLaren, maybe even, I don't know, some of the other teams could be in the mix. This is a big race. And as I said, 28 cars around there. There's quite a few rookies. And I think traffic could play a part when we get into the half distance or further into the race. It's a very early race start, 11 a.m. local time in Texas. So it's very, very early in the morning for the teams. Be all over and done with by 1 o'clock in the afternoon local. So it's, it's one of those things where you've got to kind of get up on the right side of the bed and get on with it. But I think we're going to see some great things. And another person I got to catch up with before the race is Simon Pagenaud.
Yep, Texas is a great track, obviously, for our cars. We've had a fantastic showing last year, and it's a track I've had great results in the past, and I'm still chasing a win there. It's been eluding me too many times, and it's a track that I really enjoy. So I look forward to having a great performance. Tire degradation is going to be a massive game, and last year it was quite important. But this year we have a new aero package from INDYCAR with a bit more downforce, which should help tires hold on longer, and also the pack to be a bit more together. So that's going to be an interesting race. I really look forward to it. It's a daytime race, so it's still going to be a handful with managing the tires. Personally, I'm very excited for it. It's the beginning of my year. St. Pete, unfortunately, didn't meet the expectation with the crash at the start of the race. So it's time to get some momentum going, and I look forward to it. I'm ready, and can't wait to be at a track that I really enjoy.
Simon's always a very likeable guy. I spent a lot of time the year actually that he won the Indy 500, so a few years back now, talking to him, and Malcolm Finch, the Kiwi data engineer on his team at the time, Finchy taking out his first Indy 500 win with Simon that year. But Simon's very likeable. I think the combination of him and Elio together is very good. It just, they didn't get off to a good start at St. Pete, so they're going to be looking at trying to turn that round. Of the Shank racing team obviously did very well at Daytona, and they're capable of doing that. We've seen that with Elio taking out his 4th win at Indy only a couple of years ago. So really good to see them in amongst it. And, this Texas race, it is the first oval of the season, so we've got people like Ed Carpenter returning to the fray, and oval specialist in every right. And a lot of these guys will be looking to the second oval race of the year, which is, of course, the Indy 500. Sato back in the Ganassi camp, subbing in for Marcus Armstrong at this event. Sato's a great competitor on these things, so it'll be very interesting to see how the Ganassi-Sato relationship works. He's a hard workhorse, but he's very, very brave on the oval, so I think Sato will be looking for good inroads here to set him up very well for the 500, which is now only about 60 odd days away, so it's creeping up on us awfully fast. So that's kind of the setup for Texas for this weekend. We'll have a report next week on everything that took place in Melbourne, everything that obviously takes place in Texas. We'll talk to as many of the Kiwis as we can as normal, plus some of the other people. I think we're in for a great weekend, so I hope you enjoyed this little short preview here on Racing World.